Thanks for tuning in to Replatform TV, a weekly series of expert advice and practical tips for improving your e-commerce customer experience and conversion rates. Subscribe today to be the first to hear about new videos.
Hello, and this week's episode of Replatform TV is on improving e-commerce site navigation, how to nail your header and menu. So here's what you're going to learn. 3 things. What's important for an e-commerce header and main menu and why? Good practice tips based on experience and examples from other retailers for inspiration. A couple of kind of facts and trends to set the context. The key thing with headers and navigation is making it simple. There was a famous and probably one of the first studies that pointed to the adverse effects of too much choice. It was done in 2000, and the subject was jam, and researchers found that people purchased more jam when there were fewer options available. So an offline study, but completely usable knowledge and insight into the online space. So the key thing here is put the most important elements in familiar places and make it simple to navigate your site efficiently. According to Baymard Institute, 34% of mobile e-commerce sites don't offer things like thematic product browsing. They make it more difficult for users to find products and information than they should do. So with this in mind, Paul, what do you think are some of the key shopper frustrations?
Yeah, so the first one, kind of poor UI design, I guess, and just navigation not kind of, kind of flowing well, working well across different devices, things like that. Confusing hierarchy and kind of lack of IA and kind of prioritization, choice paralysis, so it's kind of same theme really. And then the key one, navigation not being optimized for certain devices and device categories. So tablet, for example, is a pretty common one.
Excellent. So with that as our context, we're going to go through our 10 top tips. And again, as all these episodes, this is not exhaustive. We're pulling out things that we've learned over the years and seen that have had a material impact on user experience and the efficiency of getting people into purchase journeys. So number 1, prominent search bar. So we covered on-site search performance in a previous episode. Please do check it out for more practical tips about improving search results. But this is how visible search is within your header area and how accessible it is. So the key point is that search typically converts better than non-search journeys for most e-commerce sites. So make sure search box is visible and accessible. It's got to be easy to use as well. A good example, there are some sites where you click on search and then you start typing and nothing happens. You have to click on the search box again in order to make the cursor active for you to start typing. It's just wasted effort and energy. Make it simple. Things like type ahead. So when you're doing search suggestions as a person types, fade out the background of the site to help people focus on the search results that are being presented. Marks and Spencer's, M&S do this really well. It's very easy with an X close to get back into the main site. Mobile, consider having a persistent search box. This suits big catalogue retailers very well versus just an icon. If search is a small percentage of sessions, then stick with the icon. But actually, if search, like on Amazon, drives pretty much all of your user journeys, I think it's over 70 to 80% of people use search on Amazon, make it persistent. And the next thing is to A/B test the search box design. Conversion Excel done some really good testing on making simple changes like wider boxes, more prominent borders around it, increasing the engagement. I think AO.com is a nice example. They have helpful placeholder text within the box which says search products, brands or advice. So finding ways to help people use the tools. What's your one, Paul?
Great. So simple, I guess, simplify menus overall is good positioning. So I think this is one of the biggest and most important areas to test different approaches, and there's kind of different levels of testing you can do. But overall, I think it should be an area that's pretty led by data. But essentially, try and keep menus simple. Try and make it easy for people to kind of find what they're looking for is kind of the obvious goal here. Best practice will differ dependent on the type of brand or retailer you are and how big your catalog is and kind of, how many different kind of facets to that catalog there are. So multiple brands, like core kind of differences in product, like gender, for example. But some examples I really like. So I really like the Allbirds navigation on mobile. So that is just really usable kind of, the links aren't too small, like everything's kind of geared around overall kind of usability, and it's very clean, very simple. Nike, I always like the holy grail for their kind of theme being optimized for mobile, and it's a really good example of accessibility as well. So that's a really good one. And then Aim Leon Dior, which I think is how you pronounce that, is one of my favorite examples for kind of like a brand site. And they have very different approaches for each kind of top level section. And then, as I've already mentioned, mobile hugely important, arguably more important than desktop these days. There's a lot more room for error. Usability is something that can often be lacking, I guess, on mobile. And then in terms of kind of designing the kind of architecture for top navigation, it's really important to think about the balance between which routes or kind of journeys are performing the best from a conversion rate perspective, what a user is actually coming to the site and looking for, and making sure that's prominent, and then also the SEO side, so the kind of benefit of adding links into the top navigation and being on every page of the site. And then ideally you'd only kind of broaden where you need to from a catalog perspective, so try and simplify where possible. I'm a big fan, particularly for brands, of simplifying the top navigation as much as possible, and then having a really strong secondary navigation. So if you're kind of sending users to a top level content landing page, for example, and then presenting them with a secondary navigation. So KIF is a really good example of that. And then usability wise, I would suggest just avoiding complexity, reduce levels on mobile, and make kind of states and link behavior as obvious as possible.
Excellent. Yeah, usability is a good point. One real simple example to give people on this as well is on mobile, where you click on a menu, like a filtered navigation menu, and you have a slide out, and then somebody tries to update information. They want to click more than once, but each time there's a click, there's an update, and it slows people down and makes them think. Enable people to do multiple selections in one go is one good way of improving usability for menus. So number 3 on the list is making it easy to get help and advice and to contact the business. This can be critical for small local businesses servicing local areas. Even having like the local area phone number visible makes it clear and re-emphasises that it's a local business. Phone numbers for in B2B have been really important. That's why click-to-call technology tracking has helped understand and tracking leads from online into offline. Customer services links, making them clear, and especially when you're on mobile, considering that for a lot of businesses it's 70+% of traffic. When you have your main menu slide out pattern, ensuring that the customer service contact information is very clear within that, and that's not just about stores, but it's also about how do they contact you through other ways, whether that's live chat, email, whatever it might be. Links to things like FAQs. So if you have useful, helpful information, make it easy for people to do it. Sometimes they're buried in footers, not everyone finds them there. Making live chat prominent. Now, a common pattern these days is live chat sits as an icon, and it's normally pinned to the bottom of the screen, so it stays visible as people scroll. It's not integrated into the header so much. Other brands like Shoe have got it integrated into the header, and it's persistently visible, and that's nicely done on mobile. Live chat is persistently there to be able to click on to get advice. For stores, it's using the modern technology where you have multiple stores, and store finding is an important pattern. Enabling geolocation detection so people can instantly click find the store near me, but also allowing them to search based on location. Because as a customer, I might want to find a store that's not near where I am right now. I could be on holiday. I might be looking for a store. I could be at home looking for a store for when I go on holiday. So you've got to think about the way that people need to access information. And then the final point in this is pinned headers. It's common now for have long home pages, for example, or long category pages. People scroll, and if you don't have a pinned menu, then all that navigation capability is lost to the user unless they scroll back up. And things like back to top is a bit of a pain. If you can pin and keep those navigation options that are contextually relevant to the page persistently visible, it makes it easier for shoppers to move around the site.
Great. And then my next one is kind of an extension of something that I've already talked about, which is kind of hierarchy in IA. And I have already touched on this, but it is really important to kind of test different approaches here and really kind of, I guess, getting some kind of proof behind what levels are working. So sending users to a high level landing page where they get more context around then how they're navigating through the site versus sending people through to a deeper category, for example, or just a PLP. Another interesting thing here, I guess, is thinking about different types of users. So, for example, a lot of the watch brands, their navigation is all geared around collections. So, kind of specific releases they've done and specific kind of groups of product that require a bit of knowledge. But yeah, they're doing loads of top of the funnel advertising via social channels, for example. And these users don't actually really know anything about these collections. So, therefore, it's important to think about kind of net new users as well that aren't kind of as familiar with the brand and the product catalog. With Bulletproof, we tested sending products directly through to the product page, which worked really well for them. They've got quite a simple catalog, and ultimately, I guess a higher proportion of people would actually be looking for a specific product, and that worked really well. View all categories can work really well for large catalog retailers. People like to use filters and kind of start from a broader range of product and then refine down. Overall, I would suggest not overdoing navigation. So you see a lot of particularly multi-brand retailers just overdoing it in terms of the categories they have, where, as James has said or made notes here around choice paralysis, and a lot of that is geared towards SEO. And in my opinion, SEO should be an influence, but not really a key driver. So it's something to factor in. But overall, I think you want to think more about kind of navigation through the site and usability. And then simplifying core navigation on mobile is something that I've seen work really well. So essentially remove levels and then kind of go more down different navigation routes from there, from landing pages. I think that just makes things cleaner. And then Acne Studios is a really good example and a nice balanced example between kind of showing lots of links, but really thinking about, the obvious first steps of navigating on their site.
Excellent. So on to number 5. And this is quick access to key tools and features. So I'm just going to list the ones that are common and should be thought about within main header areas and pin navigation. So my account, getting people to be able to log in and showing them whether they're logged in or not logged in. So a state change is an obvious one. A lot of people have a person icon and it gets shaded in when people are logged in. Wish lists, shopping lists, and showing whether they have items in or not. Loyalty, if you have loyalty schemes, being able to showcase a link into the loyalty, or even to show how many loyalty points are available at the moment. Then also key services that are part of the core brand proposition. So a good example, Debenhams has links to Beauty Club. British Museum has a donate, because obviously donations are really important for not-for-profits and charities. Macy's has wedding registry, which is a key way of driving large order values. So think about what else you have other than your core product categories that are of value that you can provide a quick link to instead of making people hunt through body content. Product select is a good one. Sometimes people test secondary levels of navigation to link into product selectors. Maybe they use it within the main menu drop downs where you might have a product configurator, build your own. So Vashi, the jewelers, is a good example of this. Go into engagement rings, you can shop through the standard category structure, but you can also go into the make your own and go into the customization journey, and that drives traffic and revenue in for the business. And then the last point on this is it's common to use icons here. Iconography is an important part of simplifying sites, so it's not just text heavy. But if you're using icons, make them recognizable. Don't start being overly creative to create beautifully designed icons that don't make any sense to people and they don't even know what it's meant to do, because then you're adding cognitive effort and you're slowing people down.
Right. And then my last one is all around the mini basket. So essentially making sure that the icon for the basket and that kind of next step is super prominent and kind of stands out as well and is clickable on mobile. Get the language right to make sure it's consistent across the site around basket versus cart versus bag, etc. Visual state should change when you add something to the basket and ideally kind of highlight a next step, and then that should remain that way whilst the basket is populated. Rollover state for desktop and then click to open on or click to open a cart drawer or something like that, so that if you are sending people directly to the checkout, you're still giving them the ability to preview the cart, edit the cart, etc. And then the content that shows when it's empty as well is important, just making it clear or just giving people an action. So James has mentioned Gucci here as a good example.
Yeah, I like Gucci. When we were doing the project with Vashi, we looked at them and it was just the language was nice and positive. So even though the bag was empty, it was encouraging people to do something to fill it rather than your bag is empty, which is a little bit bland. And we did a prior episode on the user journeys for add to cart and how to optimize and improve it. So please do check them out. Loads of tips in that as well. Cool. So on to number 7, putting the user in control of messaging. So it's sensible to show seasonal and tactical messages in addition to your main header. So there's been a lot around COVID. You get a lot around Christmas and peak trading and delivery cutoff dates. Now, these are really helpful and useful. However, they can clutter the page if it's not easy for the user to decide which ones they want to remain visible and not. So make it simple to close messages. This applies to things where you have cookie messages as well. Where you have a service message, a lot of the times the pattern now is a simple X close, message appears, close it, it disappears. Some sites will track users who've read and closed it and not show it again. Others, when the page refreshes, the message will reappear. So just think about what the right user experience is. Fab.com is a good example. They've got a message which is try our at-home yoga class for free with a click here option, but the customers can close that if they decide it's not relevant to them. Another pattern from closing is hide and expand. So there's almost like an icon or a tray that shows the messages there, but you can collapse it if you don't want it to take up so much space on the page. And my only last point to this is just test any kind of animation and transitions on this. You're doing carefully. You want to make sure that whatever you introduce, no matter how cool you think it looks, doesn't distract people from their core purpose on the page. What's your next point, Paul?
Great. So my next one is USPs and benefits bar. I think we've touched on this again in a previous episode as well. But so here it's about kind of creating or positioning the content in the right way to kind of counter any barriers, I think, overall. So clarity around shipping and returns is a good one, and ideally localizing that based on someone's IP. Key trust signals, so displaying service reviews and merchant reviews, and any kind of call outs there. Promoting finance options can be really good, and kind of just summarizing what they are in terms of paying in certain installments, 0% finance, etc. And then ideally, so I've already mentioned localizing around reviews returns and shipping. But I think generally as much as you can localize there to kind of make people comfortable, particularly if it's not your kind of home country, I think can add a lot of value.
Definitely. And what I find interesting is sites where they've tested varied messaging bars depending on where people are in the site. So I saw on a premium brand which had a product configurator for expensive luxury products, that they changed the messaging bar dependent on the user. Yeah, which I think is smart. So contextually change what's being shown. Excellent. So number 9 on our list is subtle personalization. So obviously, I'm not going to talk about AI and ML personalization tools that personalize content, etc. I mean, that will be, we'll come to that in a future episode. I'm talking about simple things that make somebody realize that you actually know there and give a toss about who they are on your site. So a good example, welcome back message. ASOS does this, where if you're coming back, whether you're logged in or it's like a soft login on the account, if you expand it, it just says, "Hi, James," something really nice and simple. On Target, in the US retailer, they will show your local store. Your store is Cedar Rapids South, for example. Wine Society, which is a membership organisation, does something really nice where they have a little tray which shows kind of latest activity. It showcases events relevant to you and your area, etc. So really nice stuff, which just shows your latest activity with them, as a society. And then the other thing you can do is personalize the message bar. Kind of links back to Paul's previous one, is depending on different customer groups, customer segments, you can completely tailor that message bar to the user group. Try it out and try finding a way of variating messaging to drive people to other actions.
Right. And then my next one is kind of handling of international, essentially. So kind of shipping, locations, currency selection, etc. So this is a really important one to get right, because a lot of people will have restrictions around shipping on different stores, particularly if you've got multiple warehouses. So it's important to make it clear where you're currently shipping based on the store you're on. And then also highlight the currency of that store as well. And then Acne Studio is a really nice example. So when you actually hover over the kind of store currency, it just summarizes it really nicely and explains the situation, which is good. And I think that's kind of the key thing. I was just explaining the situation. So if, for example, in order to ship to another country, you need to change store, highlighting that, or if you can only ship to certain territories from that store, highlighting that. And then that is it for that one.
Excellent. So that brings us to the end of our top 10 tips. So let's try and summarize it. Paul, out of all the stuff you talked about, what would be your key takeaway?
Yeah, I think it's that point around kind of hierarchy and just testing different approaches and kind of, I guess, giving yourself the flexibility to try different things. Because, ultimately, I think that's the one area where you can always kind of be testing different things and sending users to different types of pages, and that can make a big difference. So, I think that's it, really.
Cool. And mine is keep it simple and use concise language to speed up decision making. Think about the language your customers use, not just the language you use internally to describe categories, departments, etc. Okay, so a few recommended reading. Read some really interesting and helpful articles. So on thegood.com, there's an article from John McDonald around website navigation. Baymard, reference them a lot, as a mobile e-commerce search and navigation guide, which has got some useful tips related to the navigation side. There's a really good article on dynamic yield from Leah Retta, which is called Website Navigation Examples. And Conversion XL.com have an e-commerce best practice guide on navigation as well. So some really good tips in there. It's well worth reading across different people's perspectives on this. So thanks as always for watching. Let us know what you found most useful. We always want to get feedback on the content, and share if you do like it. If you've got any tips of your own, or you want to challenge anything we said, then just leave a comment. We're happy to chat further. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for the next episode. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.